Well, hello, I'm Jeff Reiswig, a volunteer at the Commemorative Air Force Minnesota Wing. A few Saturdays ago, it was September 26th of 2020, I was given tours when the whole Wagner clan from Hastings showed up. I already knew some of the Wagners, but the brothers and sisters and the grandkids brought Larry, their father and grandfather, to our hangar. And they were all excited, and we were excited because we found out that Larry flew SNJ trainers back in the mid 50s down in Pensacola Naval Air Station. We got some of his excitement during the day, but we thought if we could maybe have a little Zoom meeting here, we could get a few more details from Larry. So I don't know, does everyone want to introduce themselves, or should we just go right into it?
I think we should just go right into it. Are you comfortable with that, Larry?
Sure, that's fine with me.
Okay. Everybody's seen my face before. Well, I'm not important.
Okay, so we just want to get into Larry's thoughts. And first I wanted to ask him about how he developed an interest at all in aviation when he was growing up.
Well, when I was a first and second grader, District 17 country school was located on the corner of County Road 42 and C, which is west of Rosemount. And at that time, 1941-42, military was using that airfield, which was located essentially around the school. It was east and south of the school. Just the very corner was the school property. Mm-hmm. So we had little yellow airplanes zipping by the windows quite a bit. So there was a lot of watching planes instead of paying attention in school. And as I said, I was only first and second grade there. I don't know if that planted a seed or not, but it may have.
Sure.
I didn't think much about it then until I was in college, and kind of ran out of money my sophomore year at St. John's University. And the Navy recruiters came in, and all one needed to get into the NAVCAD program in Pensacola was 2 years of college. So I was eligible and signed up. And that would have been then the end of the school year in 55. I ended up leaving for Pensacola, arrived there about the 1st of July to start my training. Of course, training consisted of naval aviation classes, lots of things with aerology, naval orientation, engineering, so we understood things. And of course, we had our military training with lots of drill, carrying an M1 rifle. We spent some time, let's see, the aerology classes, the navigation classes. So we didn't really get into flying. My particular instance, I was behind on swimming classes because I had injured a foot on the obstacle course. So I spent some extra time before I could head out to the Whiting Field for primary training. I had to spend some time in the training tank, the swimming tank, to pass some more swimming tests. So I didn't get to Whiting Field until later, and weather, of course, held us off some too. We didn't always get to fly in Pensacola if the weather was inclement for flying. So I didn't fly until actually the last few days of February in 1956.
Oh, okay.
That's when I actually started flying.
Larry, did you have anything on the ground as far as like a simulator? You know, you probably saw our link trainer that we had in our hangar.
Yes.
Did you have anything like that?
I don't remember exactly what we started with. I do remember that part of our training, we had to do a mock bailout from a SNJ sitting on the ground and anchored. with the engine running full out, and we had to essentially bail out from the cockpit, and we had to dive at the wing, and we would land in a net between the tail and the wing. That was our kind of our catch basin.
So if you were in the back seat and you had to eject, you were taught to eject towards the wing. Is that to avoid the tail, etc.?
Yes, and in my case, actually, because at that time, all of my time was front seat.
Okay.
We, as a student, everything was front seat. So our concern when bailing out was that we still had to dive at the wing. I presume the back seat would have been the same story. They would still have to have made an attempt to dive at the wing so that being swept and avoiding the tail, you drop down between the tail and the wing.
Yep. So then once it became time to do some in the air training, what types of aircraft were available to cadets at Pensacola at the time?
The interesting thing was the SNJ entered the training command in 1939.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, was many years before I got there. My class was the beginning of the transition. Half my class got the T-34 for their primary training.
Mm.
I was in the half that still had the SNJ. The fellows that started with the T-34 transitioned to the T-28, and I think that was probably at Softly Field where we were doing formation flying.
Mm-hmm.
And they went to the T-28, and unfortunately, the T-28 was not carrier qualification yet. It had a problem. The plane hadn't been modified to enough strength, because when they would drop the tail hook and it would catch, the plane would separate from the engine half.
Oh, wow.
The airfoil or airframe was not strong enough to stop the plane. It would literally, the engine was so powerful, it would just keep moving.
Yep.
And so those guys that started with the T-34 and went to the T-28, before they could go to carrier quals, they had to learn how to fly the SNJ. So we kind of had the last laugh.
Okay.
The old bird was still the one they had to learn to fly.
Yeah. Yeah. So you had the leg up on the SNJ. It was an addition kit to put on to get the hook installed. I mean, most SNJs we saw didn't have a hook.
Yeah, it must have been, because those that I flew, none of them had a hook on.
Yeah.
And I had not advanced far enough when I quit. I had not advanced far enough to where they got to carrier quals.
Okay.
I went, Whiting Field was our primary. Softly Field was formation flying. Then it was Corey and Barron, and I don't know which was which now. I can't remember, because I just got to that particular one, and it was gunnery and bombing, so I was still flying planes without hooks.
Yeah.
And next field, which may have been Corey, I can't remember if we Barron or Corey, which the order was. And then it went into, from gunnery and bombing, it went to the carrier quals at the last field. So I didn't actually fly one that had a hook on it.
So what was a typical day once you started flying? Was it flying all day, or was it half day books yet and then flying?
What we had, probably because there were so many students and a limited number of aircraft and a weather control situation, we'd end up being scheduled based on availability of planes and the availability of decent weather.
Yep.
I would usually, and I think there were probably only a couple days that I was up twice. Usually I was only up one time, whether it was with an instructor or when I finally soloed. But it would probably be an hour and a half, 2 hours max in the air.
Okay.
So it depended upon the weather a lot.
Sure. So it was still a lot of book work, even when you were in the air. You still had your your training on the ground?
Oh yeah, we still had various classes, one of which, of course, was studying Morse code.
Oh,
So we had
Oh, cool.
so we had to spend some time in the code room, staying current.
yep.
I ultimately got fast enough that I didn't have to go back to take qualification tests,
Okay.
which was kind of cool. And today I couldn't. If I sat down and listened to it, I wouldn't know what it was. It's too many years.
So I was going to ask you, so you were exclusively in the SNJ during your primary training,
Yes,
correct?
that's
So,
that's
so
correct.
what are your thoughts? I mean, on those first few days and how the plane responded when you got near. What are some of your thoughts and recollections of the plane?
Well, it was pretty awesome actually when you first get in the SNJ and you're taught that in order to taxi it, you had to S-turn it because you couldn't see beyond
Yep.
the
Yep.
cowling.
Yep.
You had to look out the side. So it was kind of cool. And like I said, the fellows in the T-34, I mean, it's like driving a car, you know. We had, the tricycle landing gear, and they're sitting right up there where they're looking straight ahead all the time,
Yep.
and they never had to worry about S turning then,
Okay.
and so and it was interesting. Just even the first ride was interesting because and of course that was the first light plane I was ever in.
Hmm.
My first ride in any airplane was when we got to the Christmas holidays, and we came home for 2 weeks. I think it was. We had leave over the holidays, and I think we came out of Pensacola. I think in an R4 or an R5D. I don't recall which now, but it didn't have any accoutrements. It was the seats on the side of the plane. Uh, it wasn't like getting in the commercial aircraft, and so it wasn't comfortable getting flown
Yeah.
up. But that was my first aircraft ride. I mean, I signed up for flying, and I'd never been in a plane before that.
Sure. Okay. That's interesting. So were the seats in that aircraft, were they more of a bench, more of a C-47 type?
Yeah. Yeah, we were sitting in what essentially would be like the seat, kind of sitting
Yeah.
against the bulkhead. Actually,
Oh,
we
okay.
weren't sitting facing forward. We were facing each other.
So any other thoughts about Pensacola itself? Anything that comes to mind that you'd like to relay?
Well, what going through training pre-flight, we spent quite a bit of time in classes. Uh, the various things we had to learn, the aerology, and getting into all of the bookwork that we had to study. And then, of course, we had Phi Ed.
Hmm.
We had wrestling and boxing, hand-to-hand combat. We had an obstacle course we had to run every day. We had trampolines. Uh,
Wow.
a lot of yeah, it was a lot of physical activity to get us conditioned. And then, of course, it was the swimming tank to learn to swim and stuff too, which I hadn't done before I got down there. So
So
I was
did
a
they
farm
ever
kid.
throw you in the country as survival training and have you work your way out or anything like that?
Uh, Not quite to that extent. We had what was an overnight survival thing,
Okay.
where we were out in the boondocks. We were given a piece of parachute. We were given a small piece of beefsteak, a potato, a little bit of flour, and a part of an onion. And we were told to go out and spend the night and take care of ourselves for that night. I've still
Hmm.
got some pictures around of we made a teepee out of the uh, parachute, and which
Sure.
was kind of cool. We built a fire in the middle of the teepee on the ground and dug a hole and built a fire because we happened to have hit the coldest night that year. I think it got down to 35 degrees
Wow.
in the Pensacola area.
Oh,
And
wow.
so we had a fire in the center, and I was the guy with the slow heart rate that woke up the most, that had to rebuild the fire during the night. But it was kind of cool. We fixed our own meal at night, and we were, like I said, we were out in the boondocks. That was our survival night,
Yes.
which was not terrible. not terribly difficult.
Okay. Well,
So you got,
especially for a Minnesota boy.
yeah, right,
Yeah.
right.
So, so, and then of course, as I alluded to, you showed up at our hangar 3 weeks ago on that Saturday, and as it turned out, I found out that your kids bought you a little present. Uh,
Yes, they did.
could you
That was
maybe
cool.
expound on that a little bit?
Well, actually, they bought it about a year ago, and at that time, the J was done flying for the season.
Mm,
So
yep.
I did not get the flight in last year because technically it was for my 85th birthday last October, a
Okay.
year ago. So that's what that technically was. So then they said, well, we'll do it in the spring. And then I had various health problems and we kept postponing it. So even when we came up for the open house, it wasn't intended to be the day that I rode. But
Mm.
the kids talked with you fellows and determined that there was room in the day for another ride in the SNJ, and they kind of talked me into taking advantage of it that day as long as I was there and physically able to make the
Yeah,
trip.
yeah. Well,
So it was,
you look great climbing up on the wing. I remember it was a kind of a high overcast type of day, and
yes,
you can't count on weather in Minnesota. So even if there would have been a fly day later, you may not have been able to get your ride in. So I think
that's
it's a
true.
good thing you took that flight. And now maybe you could give us a few thoughts on your flight and the excitement of climbing in and hearing that engine start.
It was fabulous, in one word. But it was the first time I rode in the back seat, obviously, because before as a student I was front seat only.
Okay.
So it was kind of cool getting in the back seat, and I was fascinated when I got in to see that it actually had controls in the back seat, because I thought
Yep.
perhaps it wouldn't be in your plane like it was in Pensacola. We had dual controls, but it was cool. It was the taxiing was kind of fun because enjoying that and reliving that S turning as he taxied around to get to the end of the runway. That was it was all very familiar, and it came back rather quickly just watching this, looking out either side to see where we were going, and the pleasure of getting the thrill when he hit the power to take off. It was great. It was just absolutely wonderful feeling again. And of course we went down the Mississippi and up to St. Croix. Uh, we did a circle over my house where I live here on the St. Croix, which was kind of cool to be able to see it all from the air.
Yep.
And we flew a little farther north where my brother lives in the farm country up here, and we circled around his house so that they knew we had been there. So it was a great pleasure to get up and do that again and see everything from the air again.
Well, and
I have
I can attest to your family on the ground as they saw the plane leave and they saw you getting in and out. There were smiles, there were grins, and I even caught a couple little teardrops. I think
yeah
they were so
yeah
moved that you get to finally take your flight. So,
yeah
and when I saw you
it was
come
great.
back out, I saw you come back out with that grin ear to ear. That was a telling sign.
It was fabulous. I've only been up in light planes a couple times since Pensacola. I had a friend that worked at 3M when I did. At that time, he was in mail services, but he was a young man that was taking flight lessons out, which was then Southport Field, which was the field on 42 and Cedar. It became, after the military was done with it, it became a small field that was used for a number of years, and it was called Southport. And he was taking lessons out there in a Piper Tripacer. And I flew with him just because it was a thrill to get back in the air, which was probably 7 or 8 years after I had flown. And we brought that one out and flew around out here too, which was cool. And then the last time I was up in a light plane was about the time I retired from 3M, which is close to 30 years ago. Chuck Kent was our advertising manager, lived in Lake Elmo, and he had, after he retired, he had pursued getting his private license. So he had a plane at Lake Elmo and called me one day and invited me to ride with him. We flew over to Eau Claire for coffee, which was kind of cool, out of Lake Elmo. And that plane reminds me a lot of the one that the guys are restoring there in your hangar.
Is
It's
that
very similar to that one.
the Navion, you mean? The
What is that? Navion, yes.
Navion.
Now, I don't know if Chuck's plane may have been a Navion. It was a lot like that one. I
Mhm.
could not remember for sure what it was, and I think it may have been that. For that matter, it even could be that plane.
Yeah.
Chuck retired and he's passed away since. And I don't know where he went after he retired. I think he ultimately passed away in Arizona, but he could have been in Florida. That plane could be the plane that he had. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
Because I don't know who donated it to the commemorative people, but it came out
I'm
of
not
Florida.
sure. I don't know if
so
Amy remembers or knows.
I would have to check on the exact name, but I know it was, I believe it was a friend of a member at the time. So, but I'd have to check on the name.
it's a plane similar to the one I had ridden over to Eau Claire in. So that's another nice, comfortable little aircraft to fly in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and actually the Navion is right in your time frame of naval air training because it was a mid-50s. It was a Korean War
Yeah.
airplane. So, yeah.
Yeah. Pretty fun, versatile airplane for sure.
So Larry,
Yes.
any more thoughts about what you'd tell people about the Commemorative Air Force Minnesota Wing and any recommendations for them?
I would definitely recommend it to everybody I know to visit you guys and spend some time there. It's fabulous.
Thank you.
One of the things I remember from Pensacola that I didn't mention before, part of our training is, and we're talking about survival. One of the things we got was a Dilbert Dunker ride. We had a section of aircraft in the training tank building, the swimming pool, and it was mounted probably 20 feet above the pool on the north end of the pool, and it was on a set of rails. We would have to get in the plane, and the rails would take it like a dive into the pool. And this section of, if you can imagine taking the fuselage and chopping it off in front of the cockpit and behind the cockpit, let's say that section, just that much of the aircraft, that hit the water probably at a 45-degree angle. And when it hit the water, it tipped upside down and settled down into the pool. The pool was probably 18, 20 feet deep at that end.
Yeah.
So you're actually hanging upside down in the cockpit at that point.
Wow.
And we had to extract ourselves from our harnesses and get out and get up to the surface. And so many people were disoriented because they were now upside down, and instead of diving down to get out of the cockpit, they'd have a problem with getting out of the cockpit because they didn't realize they had to dive down. So you had to be oriented when you landed in the pool to come out properly. And then, of course, you had to surface and go through the steps of allegedly inflating a life raft and opening up your life jacket and getting that going too. It was all part of the training.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I imagine that would be pretty disorienting, being upside down after crashing in the water.
Yes, yes. I had spent so much extra time there learning to swim that was kind of second nature to me when I did it, because I'd watched it happen to so many people.
Yep. Yes. So anything else? Amy, do you have anything you'd like to ask Larry?
I don't think so. I'm kind of just enjoying listening.
Yeah.
Usually I'm
So
driving the bus. So
it's a long time ago. Sue just came over here and pointed out something. I still have, if you can see this.
Oh.
that was my necktie
That's so
the day
cool.
that the day that I soloed. That was the part of the ritual. We cut the tie off, and
Oh,
then
neat.
I indicated that was the plane I flew, of course, the
Yeah.
SNJ, and my
That's
solo
cool.
date was April 20th,
Oh,
1956.
yep.
Oh, that's neat. That's a much better tradition than they do now where they cut the back of the shirt, the t-shirt out. I like that. Cut
Oh,
part of your tie off. Yeah.
yeah, we cut the tie. The other thing was I've got my flight logbook from
Yeah.
Oh,
Pensacola,
cool.
in which I can attest to the fact that I started flying on February 24th, 1956.
Wow.
That was my first flight.
And
My last flight,
how long before you soloed then? How long
I
did it take
soloed
to solo?
April 20th.
Oh,
April 20th. Now with the SNJ, part of it because we had to learn to taxi it and the more difficulty in flying a tail dragger,
yep.
we took, I think they said it was 19 or I think it was 19 hops or 19 flights before we qualified for solo.
Okay.
Whereas the T-34, I think it was 10 flights or 10 hours, I think they
Oh,
said it was.
Okay.
And so in our case, my solo time came about when it was supposed to, because I'd had that many flights in that time. And we had gone through formation, night flying. We did night flying too. So we
yeah.
got a little instrument in, not a lot of instrument. One flight with an instructor where we went out and shot landings at night with the instructor in the back seat. And then we went and did it solo. And the solo flight was probably my only really scary flight that I had in an SNJ,
Okay.
the night solo flight. I had a problem probably with one of a fellow student not adjusting his altimeter before he took off. We were supposed to set
Oh,
our altimeter.
Oh,
I think we were supposed to set our altimeter at 600 feet, as I recall, in Pensacola.
yep.
And what had happened, I was on the 45 on my approach, and the landing duty officer came on the air and said, "Planes," now that's plural. He said, "Planes at the 45, take a wave off."
Yep.
And a wave off to us is move over to the right and fly at maybe 50, 60 feet. I don't recall exactly what the elevation was, alongside of the runway and not shoot the landing. But when he said that and he said planes, I heard the plural. And I had my hand on the throttle, my other hand on the stick, and I just kind of, I almost not froze, but I hesitated because I thought, if there's two planes, where is he? I can't see him.
Yep.
I can see above me.
Yep.
There's no clearance lights up there, and there's nothing right in front of me. I can't see anything. So I just hesitated. And fortunately, I guess, the other student took the wave off, and he came up within a matter of feet in front of
Ooh.
me. And I got his prop wash throwing my plane around,
Yep.
and he took the wave off, and I chose, because we're essentially in the same airspace, I chose not to. I shot my landing, and then when I came off from the landing, I paid attention to his lights so I could see where he was.
Mm-hmm.
And I discovered that he was considerably farther out, away from the runway. We were flying with maintaining our runway light, our wingtip light on the runway. That's how we
Sure.
oriented ourselves in the pattern. And I watched, and he was considerably farther out than I was. So as I coming around the next time at the 45, I knew that he was going to be under me again because
Yep.
of where he was. So I just arbitrarily took a wave off and passed him. So I wasn't in the same area that he was again. So
Sure.
I got into the pattern above and flew around. But And when we came in for debriefing after the flying that night, the duty officer came in and he said, "I want to thank the pilot that didn't obey my instructions." He says, because he said we'd have had a midair right there at the end of the runway, at probably 150 feet or so.
Yep.
And so that was my scariest flight. That's the one that I couldn't be sitting here now if I hadn't disobeyed him, so to speak.
That's right.
But we didn't.
And it's funny.
We didn't discuss.
It's funny how all those details just kind of burn themselves into your mind, isn't it? I mean, they come flashing back pretty vividly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's something you don't forget.
Nope.
No.
So
it wasn't terribly long after that I decided I need to stay alive and I quit flying. But I would still fly if I had money when I came home. I finished my time as a white hat.
well, what's that saying? Something about life is what happens when you're busy making other plans.
Yeah.
So you can have all these paths you want to take, but somehow, just like the instruction that you didn't follow when you were up in the air, somehow you know the right way to go. And because you did look at your wonderful family and things, and you've had a great life from what I can hear, and you come back to that hangar anytime and bring them all with you.
Absolutely.
We'll be back.
Yes.
We'll definitely be back.
Okay. And then I hear you heard us on Saturday. You heard Miss Mitchell from what your daughter told me.
Absolutely. Yeah, Sue picked it up when you left the field. She picked it up with the app.
Yep.
And she said they're flying down the Mississippi now. And I'm right on the St. Croix up on the bluff, of course. But so I stepped out onto the porch, which is glassed in. I stepped out and I said, I can hear them. And that's about the time you were probably making the turn coming off of the Mississippi onto the St. Croix. So it was really cool. And of course we could watch you fly over.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. She said you heard us before she did. So you still have good ears.
Oh yes, I recognize those pair of engines.
Oh yeah,
Miss Mitchell doesn't make herself
return.
known. So yeah. Well, you live
When
in a
you
great
return,
spot too. We do a lot of flyovers in your area, so you're in a
Absolutely.
great spot. So
And the
anything
pictures
else
the
you'd
guys-
like to relay?
Well, I enjoyed the pictures the guys sent, or that Sue picked up with the formation flying too, with the two aircraft.
Yep.
And one of those pictures of the J looking directly below the tail is where my house sits on the St. Croix.
Oh, neat. Okay. So that's on the St. Croix, correct? That's on the St. Croix?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that was a Hastings boy. Now you're down in the Hastings area, and one of our members named Andy, he's from that area, and he's the one who took those 4 good pictures that we sent you.
That was cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
All right. So
that brings back memories.
Yeah. Well, I thought of you as soon as Andy put those up. I thought I got to send those down to Larry Wagner because he'd like to see them. So we're glad you like them. So
Absolutely. Thank you.
all right. So, well, I guess that's about it. But like I say, we'd like to extend our welcome to you at any time. And we're glad we could bring some thoughts and memories back from the mid-1950s for you.
I'll be back.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Larry. And thank you, Jeff. This was great.
This is a good time. I like this. So,
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you
Thanks,
for
Larry. And
thinking
we'll
of
see
us.
you again. And by the way, happy birthday.
Yes,
your birthday?
thank you very much.
It's
Aw.
this month.
Coming up pretty quickly.
It's this
The
it's coming up.
27th.
Yep.
Happy birthday.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you. Thank
All right.
you
We'll
very
see you
much.
now. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Okay.